Hello, comments. I read Dagon by H.P. Lovecraft, and I've been going through my H.P. Lovecraft collection, reading chronologically, reading the first stories first, and getting to the later stories. So I can really see him kind of develop as an author, and so I think Dagon is really kind of his first cosmic horror story, and I think it's really kind of an interesting place. So it's about someone who during World War One was taken captive by the Germans, and he escaped on a boat. And so he's just like going on a boat. He's not a great navigator. He's somewhere in the Pacific, somewhere in the southern hemisphere. He doesn't really know where. And he finds himself on some kind of large, muddy landmass that's too wet to walk on. And so he has like no idea what's going on. He's like, I guess like it erupted forth from the bottom of the ocean, and so it's too wet to walk on. So he has to wait 3 days, and because this landmass raised up from the bottom of the ocean, it's covered in fish that are now dead. They're suffocated in the air, and they're rotting. So it has this horrible, awful stench covering this new landmass, and he walks towards a hill and he finds an obelisk with strange hieroglyphs of some kind of culture he unknown to him. And the hieroglyphs are like made up of sea creatures, they're like squids and whales on this obelisk, like it was mermaids who made it. And he sees a monster, so he goes back, and he doesn't really remember what happens next, but he wakes up in a hospital in San Francisco. And so he's traumatized by this experience, by this idea of this horrible underwater monster. And he tries telling a few people about it, but there's no reason to believe this landmass even exists or appeared or anything. It might be gone for all he knows. And so obviously nobody's going to believe him, so he doesn't really tell anybody about it. And there's one person he references who's like an expert on the Philistines, and he asks them about the god they worship, but he's very clear that he's not going to really make a connection. He's not going to be able to tell this other person about his experience, so he has to hold it up, just this horrible, awful experience of that underwater thing that's haunting him, and he becomes a morphine addict, and he's about to do himself in. And he hears it again. He hears this kind of scaly thing. And so I read this, and honestly, I kind of thought, well, what's the big deal about this? If you really, you think about it, it's a genre that's about our ignorance of the world and our insignificance of the world. And I think, and later on, a lot of the other kind of Lovecraftian creatures, like the eldritch things, are associated with deities and aliens and this very high level thing. But I do think it makes sense to start off with the ocean. We tend to think of the unknown, like hidden fairy worlds and the endless expanse of space and death, the ultimate unknown realm. But there really is something about the ocean. It's dark. It's completely inhospitable to people. You can't go down there and live. At least not in H.P. Lovecraft's time. And you can barely do it now. We've been to the moon. We've only explored like a tiny percentage of the ocean, Like we have little robots on Mars, but going deep down into the ocean, that's really hard, and we still discover new things. And it's not desolate, space is empty, Like maybe there's something out there in an infinite, vast, empty space. But in the ocean, we know for a fact there are things there. We just don't know what. I think we also do have this image that it is a place a lot of people end up. So obviously, it's not where you want to die. I don't think you want to die anywhere. But we do have this idea that there are people who die at the ocean. And a lot of times we very much do have this idea that an ocean death is a different kind of a death, With stories about Davy Jones' Locker, for instance, where sailors who died in the sea go to, live out the rest of their death. And we have stories of, horrible monsters. We have, the Kraken. I think it is no, coincidence that a lot of times when we have representations of aliens, they have, tentacles and they're very kind of octopus-like creatures, because an octopus is really kind of the most alien animal for most of us that we could experience. It's very solitary, it's very intelligent, it moves around in a very different way. It's like a cannibal. It's really kind of a terrifying thing to really just think of how much is out there, how much in the ocean that we simply don't know. And if we don't think, if we just let our imagination wander for a little bit, and we don't limit ourselves to, well, maybe there's like an octopus or two down there, maybe there's a giant squid, maybe there's like a really big giant squid. What if there is something really powerful, really disturbing? What if there is something that haunts you, that knows about you, that can hunt you from the water? Anyways, I think the man was kind of afraid of the world itself, and so it makes sense that he'd be afraid of the ocean. And if you look at places, great mysteries, the ocean really is the first one. Even before space, even before death, you can go out and you can look at the ocean, you can look down, and you can look into the mysterious depth and know that you will never really know what's down there. So there are some words I had to look up while I was reading this. There's garret, which means attic. There's packet. Obviously, I know what a packet is, but has a nautical sense of being a ship. Apparently, it's a ship employed by the government. Who knew? There's hummock, which is a small hill or knoll. There's gibbous, which, when used to describe the moon or perhaps other celestial bodies, it means it's not full, but it's kind of more than half. So when the moon is like 70-80% full, it's gibbous. There's disport, which means to enjoy. I think it's related to sports, as in like the recreational activity. You enjoy soccer, football, whatever, so disport. There's also the Piltdown Man, which is apparently a scientific hoax, where someone meshed together some bones. It was like a human skull and some orangutan teeth and some other things, and they said this was like a missing link in evolution between apes and man. This was later disproven, but not when the story was written, and so there was a period of time where people just thought, oh yeah, somewhere, before Neanderthals or after Neanderthals, I don't know exactly where, there was this other creature, and then we realized it was just someone making things up. So I'm going to be reading some more H.P. Lovecraft stories, and I'm going to be talking about some other horror stories. So if that seems like a fun time to you, you can subscribe. But remember, good night, good day, good potato.